Give me
right?
the case for tariffs.
When you say tariffs, like, it's not about broad tariffs. Tariffs are probably a good thing in certain industry sectors with certain countries where it happens to make sense. Maybe we got kind of caught off foot in a few situations, and maybe they need to be more balanced. Great. Like that's fine, but just this whole blanket statement of tariffs when you're looking at tariffs from 100 years ago and trying to make that the precedent for why we need to have tariffs today, that narrative just is nonsensical. Tariffs do make sense in certain situations. I'll give you a perfect situation, like the milk scenario, right? Like with Canada, like we have this incredibly high 200+% tariff that Canada puts on the US for milk. But that tariff doesn't actually start until we hit this very high floor for milk. The reason why that tariff is there is to ensure that we don't completely flood Canada with our milk and put their own milk producers out of business. So Canada's saying, hey, we'll take all this milk up into a point, but at a point, you kind of have to stop selling us milk because we have to have our own milk producers selling us milk. And I believe we're selling a lot. They're buying a ton more milk from us than they ever have the last few years. But at a certain point, they're going to cap it. So they put this ridiculously high tariff rate. Now, I don't think we paid anything in tariffs, or they paid anything in tariffs for milk because we never hit that rate, even with all the additional milk. So tariffs are like supposed to be strategic for a very specific product class where you have an issue, and tariffs are a tool. It's an economic tool. It's one of many economic tools that you can use to address a problem. But the most important thing that we need to be thinking about right now is supply chain. Like the global supply chain that we have kind of initiated over the past 20, 25 years of free trade is so sophisticated and so strategic. If you look at like cars in the US, like how many times the auto parts move between Canada and Mexico, like why do you think that is? It's because of specialization. Right? It's because we happen to have a plant in that country and we happen to have a labor class in that country that is really good at doing this one thing. And it really doesn't make sense for every country in the world to replicate that one thing. That would be inefficient for the entire automotive sector. So we all kind of agree that, hey, they're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do that, and we're all going to optimize so that we can have a car, right, that it utilizes everyone's workforce and everyone's sense of specialization. Now, it's not a perfect model, but it's like the best model that we've been able to come up with over the past 25 years. And look how cheap generally our products have become. Like I joke about this all the time. Like stuff is so cheap. Now, take the brand stuff away, like the premium that you pay for a brand. I mean, you can go right now to Target or Walmart and you can get like a pretty decent shirt for like single-digit dollars. Like, remember Dave back in the 80s when we were growing up? I think it cost more back then to buy the same shirt in those dollars, right? That's insane. Like, what sort of impact has that had for quality of life where every single American, no matter who you are, can like have a nice shirt and have a good pair of jeans and have a pair of, I mean, that sounds kind of stupid, but like.
What's the danger of that if we become too reliant on inexpensive labor in other countries?
It's not always about the expense. Okay, I'm going to talk about hard drives, for example. China has like something like 100,000 skilled laborers in China, with mostly female, mostly smaller females with really tiny hands that have years and years of expertise of like fine-tune articulation for hard drive line manufacturing. Right? You've heard Tim Cook talk about this a little bit with the iPhone. He's like, it's not about the cost always. We just don't have the specialized labor force to do a lot of these manufacturing jobs. And sometimes it's expertise. Sometimes it's literally just having the labor that's willing to do that job. Like, listen, my daughter does not want to go work in a sewing factory. Okay, surprise, surprise. Like, I don't care who you are in America. I don't care what your demographic is, where you live, what your level of wealth is. I bet you if you have a 16-year-old daughter anywhere in the US right now, and you were like, "Hey, what do you think about like working in a sewing factory for the next 30 years?" She's like, "Not happening." Period. End of story. You know what I'm saying? Like but there are other cultures around the world where that's not only acceptable, but that's like that would be awesome. Like a good paying job in a sewing factory where my cousins work and like, yeah, and it's part of the culture. So like part of this is cultural, part of this is specialization. Uh like there's so many factors here. It's not always about cost. But yes, sometimes it is, right? And like that, I agree. Like the one thing I can agree with this administration is our top priority shouldn't always be about how to consume everything at the lowest possible cost.
At a certain point, though, if you take that to like the nth degree, if other countries are like abusing labor laws and stuff like that, and they're able to then get dirt cheap labor, dirt cheap product, and then sell it to the United States, so we could effectively not compete with anything. Like, do you see that even being a possibility, or is that kind of a false threat?
I think that's false. Because truthfully, like there are other countries you can shift labor to where you have more control over not over adhering to labor laws. You're not going to necessarily bring that back to the United States. Because again, in most of those situations, we just simply do not have the labor force. End of story, period. Right? So like that could be a real problem, but that doesn't mean that we have 500,000 people prepared to make sneakers in the United States, right? Every day, right? Like, and we do make some in the US, by the way, today. Like, usually a lot of our manufacturers here, most of them are like at capacity. Most of them have open jobs. They're trying to hire. Guys, you know this. Like, half of my life right now is in robotics. Why? Because most of the world's manufacturers are desperate for workforce, right? They want more humans. We want these humans to work in factories. We just can't get them right now. I believe what we should be thinking about is a longer term strategy for onshoring, like a 30-year strategy for onshoring with automation and robotics, right? That's really doable. Maybe we make some huge sacrifices where we start to onshore our most critical industries, pharmaceutical supply, minerals, like maybe even semiconductors, things that we think are critical to our country's sovereignty. Like, yes, maybe we should make those moves first and then get on a 20 or 30-year plan for how do we ultimately onshore more manufacturing in a way that works for the United States, which is not going to be putting humans in factories by the millions. I just hate to say it. Like, why are we not talking about that? Like, nobody wants to do that here. Like, it's not even an option.
Yeah.
So, like, we shouldn't pretend like it's an option. And that's why when you asked me in the start, like, hey, what can we do about these? I'm like, you actually can't implement those tariffs. Like it's not even an option.
So you think
You could implement them, and then everything just gets more expensive until it doesn't work anymore.
Correct. And it won't work anymore.
Yeah,
and then
pretty
you'll
quickly.
end up reversing out of the tariff. So like, yes, you could do anything for a short period of time, but there is no viable path for us to actually implement anything remotely close to the tariffs that were shown on that board.